Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Madeline, and I'm a digital cartographer. For my entire life, my family, the renowned Alistair explorers, treated my career as a joke, a childish game played on a screen. They were obsessed with finding Betrayal, the legendary lost city of the serpent, a quest that had consumed their fortune and their spirits. They never knew that the video game I poured my heart and soul into was a secret project, a new way of seeing the world they thought they owned. 2 days ago, my algorithms, my code, my game, it pinpointed the exact location of their lost city. I'm on a plane right now, flying toward them in the heart of the jungle, and in my hands I'm holding a single tablet. It's the one thing that can save their legacy, but more importantly, it's the one thing that will finally prove them wrong. Before I dive into the story of how a ghost in the machine brought an ancient dynasty to its knees, I want to hear from you. Let me know where in the world you're watching from in the comments below. And if you've ever had someone doubt your passion, go ahead and hit that like button, and consider subscribing to join our community of people who know that sometimes the quietest work makes the loudest impact. The Alistair name was a heavy thing to carry. It smelled of canvas, damp earth, and distant exotic wood smoke. For 4 generations, my family had been synonymous with exploration. They didn't just visit remote places, they conquered them, planting flags on maps that had previously been blank. My great-grandfather charted tributaries of the Amazon. My grandfather was the first to summit the treacherous Mount Kailan in Borneo. And my father, Alistair Sr., had dedicated his entire existence to a single, all-consuming obsession. Betrayal. The city was a myth, a whisper in Mayan folklore, a legendary metropolis of gold and knowledge swallowed by the Guatemalan jungle centuries ago. To my father, it was more than a legend. It was his birthright, the crowning achievement that would etch the Alistair name into eternity. Our family home, a sprawling stone manor in the English countryside, was less a home and more a museum to this ambition. Its walls were lined with tribal masks, ancient navigational tools, and framed faded photographs of my ancestors staring heroically into the middle distance. And in the center of it all was the expedition room, a chamber dominated by a massive table covered in topographical maps of Central America, stained with coffee rings and marked with the red ink of 100 failed searches. My brother Duncan was born for that room. He was 2 years older than me, built like our father, with the same rugged jaw and an unshakable belief in his own destiny. He was the heir, the next link in the chain. From the moment he could walk, he was being taught how to read a compass, tie a bowline knot, and fire a shotgun. I, on the other hand, was a disappointment from the start. I was quiet, I was indoorsy, and I preferred the crisp, clean lines of a map to the muddy reality of the territory it represented. The rift between my world and theirs was etched into my earliest memories. I remember one summer afternoon. I must have been 8 years old. Duncan came running into the expedition room, his face flushed with triumph, holding a muddy, vaguely pointed rock. "Father, look! A Neolithic arrowhead," he'd bellowed. My father had swept him up in a hug, his voice booming with pride. "Excellent, my boy. A true explorer's eye." He'd examined the rock with the gravity of a museum curator, declaring it a significant find. Later that day, I came into the same room, clutching a roll of paper. I had spent a week meticulously surveying our estate's grounds, measuring distances by foot, noting the positions of ancient oaks and the flow of the creek. I had drawn a map, colored in with pencil crayons, complete with a key and a compass rose. I presented it to my father, my heart thumping with a shy hope. He glanced at it for a moment, a bemused smile on his face. "That's nice, Maddie. Very creative." He patted my head and turned back to his conversation with Duncan about the arrowhead, which I later saw the gardener identify as just a sharp bit of slate. I'd stood there, holding my map, feeling a strange, cold hollowness. He hadn't even really looked at it. It was just a doodle. My world of lines and data and precision was just a silly little girl's hobby. The only person who understood was my grandfather, Thomas Allister. He was from a different era of exploration, one that valued scholarship as much as stamina. While my father saw the world as a thing to be conquered, my grandfather saw it as a puzzle to be solved. His study was my sanctuary. It was a dusty, book-lined haven filled with the smell of old paper and leather. He had shelves of hand-drawn charts, his own journals filled with elegant script and detailed sketches, and a collection of Mayan codices he'd acquired over the years. He was the one who first showed me the beauty of a well-made map. "It's not just paper, Madeline," he would say, his voice a low, gentle rumble. "It's a story. It tells you not just where things are, but why they are there. Look at the contour lines, how they hug the river. That tells you about geology, about life." He was fascinated by Ixmiquil, but not in the same feverish way as my father. He believed the city was real, but he also believed everyone was looking for it with the wrong eyes. "They're searching for a city of gold," he'd told me once, tapping a brittle page of the Khan Codex. "But the glyphs don't speak of wealth. They speak of water, of stars. They speak of a sunken eye. I think the map is not the territory. I think the secret is between the lines." He passed away when I was 15, and with him went the only voice in the family that spoke my language. The study was locked, and my father's obsession deepened, becoming more frantic, more desperate. The inevitable confrontation came during a tense family dinner when I was 18. It was a formal affair, the kind my mother, Eleanor, insisted on, to maintain a veneer of normalcy as the foundations of our life were crumbling. The silver was polished, the crystal gleamed, but the air was thick with the unspoken anxiety of mounting debts. I cleared my throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the silence. "I've decided on my university course," I announced. My father looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Archaeology, then. Or perhaps geology. Good practical fields." Duncan smirked into his water glass. "I'm going to study geographic information systems," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "GIS, it's digital cartography, computer-based mapping and data analysis." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. My father placed his fork down with a deliberate, soft click. His face, which had been momentarily open, closed into a mask of profound disappointment. "Allister's find places, Madeline," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "We feel the earth under our boots. We hack our way through the jungle with a machete in our hands. We don't sit in a dark room and color things in on a screen." "It's not coloring in, Dad," I tried to explain, my cheeks burning. "It's about data layers, satellite imagery, predictive modeling. We can see things you can't see from the ground." Duncan let out a short, derisive laugh. "Predictive modeling? Are you going to predict where the lost city is with your computer game, Maddie?" The nickname stung, as it always did. The game. That's all they ever saw. My passion, my future, reduced to a childish pastime. My mother just looked down at her plate, her hands clenched in her lap, a silent testament to her inability to bridge the chasm that had opened between her husband and her daughter. That night, I knew I was truly on my own. The lie about the video game began as a form of self-preservation. In my early 20s, I tried, on several occasions, to explain my work. I'd talk about LiDAR and multispectral imaging, about building algorithms to detect subtle soil composition changes from orbit. Their eyes would just glaze over. It was easier to let them believe I worked for a tech company designing landscapes for video games. It was a box they could put me in, one labeled harmless and irrelevant. "How's the game coming along, Maddie?" my father would ask during our stilted weekly phone calls, the condescension barely veiled. "Still playing with your glowing toys?" I'd just grit my teeth and say, "It's fine, Dad." The truth was, my work was anything but a game. After graduating at the top of my class, I was headhunted by a geotech firm founded by the visionary doctor. Eris Thorne. Eris wasn't an explorer in the Alistair sense. He'd never summited a mountain, but he had a vision of a world mapped to the last centimeter, its secrets unlocked not by machetes, but by mathematics. He saw the potential in my final year dissertation, a theoretical paper on using predictive algorithms to identify archaeological sites. He gave me a budget, a small team, and a world of data. He gave me Project Chimera. My apartment was a world away from the ancestral manor. It was a small, functional space in a concrete building, but it was mine. The living room was dominated not by a sofa, but by a U-shaped desk with 3 large monitors and the humming tower of a custom-built server. This was my command center. This was where I was building the future. Project Chimera was my life's work. We were developing a system that could synthesize terabytes of data from public sources like Landsat and private orbital platforms, and teach an AI to see the invisible. We fed it everything: historical maps, geological surveys, translations of ancient texts, even my grandfather's journals, which I had painstakingly digitized. The goal was to create a tool that could map the world's most inaccessible regions without ever setting foot in them. "They see a game, Madeline," Eris had told me during one of our late-night brainstorming sessions, his eyes alight with excitement. "Let them. While they're playing in the mud, we're building the God's eye view. We are going to change the very definition of discovery." His belief in me was the antidote to my family's scorn. He was the mentor I had lost when my grandfather died, a fellow believer in the power of data. While I built my new world, my family was losing theirs. The quest for Iximchel had become a financial black hole. My father, driven by a desperate gambler's logic, kept doubling down on his bets. He sold off a parcel of land that had been in the family for 200 years to fund an expedition that yielded nothing but snake bites and debt. Then went a Goya painting from the dining room. Then my grandmother's jewelry. Each sale was a fresh wound. The news usually reached me secondhand, through a clipped article in a society magazine or a hushed, pained phone call from my mother. "Your father has secured new funding," she would say, her voice stretched thin. I knew secured new funding was a euphemism for sold another piece of our history. One evening she called, her voice trembling. "Maddie, dear, I know things are tight, but the boiler has broken. And your father, he sent all our remaining funds to the expedition account. She was asking me for money. Me, the daughter with the silly computer game job. I sent her what I could. My own savings were not vast, but it left a bitter taste in my mouth. I wasn't angry at her. I was angry at the obsession that had forced her into this position. That was forcing me to financially support the very delusion that had cast me out. The shame was a constant, low-grade fever. The great Alistairs, a name once associated with fearless discovery, was now whispered about in connection with bankruptcy and folly. I poured all that shame, all that anger, into my work. I became obsessed in my own way, not with a city of stone, but with a city of data. I was determined to prove my grandfather right. The secret was between the lines. I focused Chimera's analytical power on a 100-square-kilometer patch of the Guatemalan jungle, the area my father's expeditions had fruitlessly scoured for 30 years. For months, it was a frustrating grind. The AI would flag false positives, natural rock formations that mimicked walls, strange clusters of vegetation that turned out to be fungal blooms. We'd hit dead ends, recalibrate the algorithms, and start again. I spent countless nights staring at my screens, fueled by lukewarm coffee, watching the system sift through layers of information. I cross-referenced satellite-based ground-penetrating radar with multispectral images that could analyze the health of the jungle canopy. I fed it my grandfather's theory about the sunken eye. Then, 2 days ago, it happened. It wasn't a sudden flash of lightning. It was a whisper. A single pixel on the main monitor blinked from amber, low probability, to red. Then another, and another. The AI had found a correlation it had never seen before. a subtle, almost imperceptible circular pattern in the vegetation, several miles in diameter. The trees in this circle were of a slightly different species, their chlorophyll signature unique. Cross-referencing this with the ground-penetrating radar data, a new image resolved itself on the screen. It wasn't a clear picture, but a ghostly echo. The faint, undeniable geometry of large, buried structures. A plaza. The base of a pyramid. And in the center, a deep anomaly consistent with a massive cenote, or sinkhole. A sunken eye. It was exactly where my grandfather had hinted it would be. In a region my father had dismissed as geologically barren, 30 kilometers northwest of his current search area. My breath caught in my throat. I ran the diagnostics again, and again. I spent 48 hours in a frantic, obsessive haze, verifying every single data point, trying to disprove my own discovery. But every test, every simulation, came back with the same result. Probability of a major, undiscovered pre-Columbian settlement. 98.7%. I pushed back from my desk, my hands shaking. I had found it. I, Madeline Allister, the girl who played with glowing toys, had found Iximchial. A fierce, vindictive part of me wanted to call a press conference right then and there. I imagined the headlines. Tech firm discovers lost city, proving decades of exploration wrong. I imagined my father's face as he saw the news. The pure, undiluted triumph of it was a heady thought. But then a different image surfaced. My mother's face, etched with worry. The memory of my grandfather's gentle voice. The weight of the Allister name, tarnished and ridiculed, but still a part of me. This wasn't just about being right. It was about legacy, theirs and mine. To save their legacy, I had to let them believe they were a part of saving it. To build mine, I had to prove that my way was the future. The two goals were intertwined. With a steady hand, I copied all the relevant data onto a ruggedized, encrypted tablet. I booked a series of flights that would take me from the sterile order of London to the humid chaos of the Guatemalan jungle. I packed a small bag with practical clothes I hadn't worn in years. The tablet felt impossibly heavy in my carry-on, a dense little slab of glass and metal that held the power to shatter or save my entire family. As the plane began its descent towards the first leg of my journey, I looked at the glowing screen, at the coordinates of a ghost city no one had seen for 1,000 years. I was no longer just coloring in the map. I was about to rewrite it. The journey was a descent, not just in altitude, but in time. The sleek efficiency of Heathrow gave way to a chaotic terminal in Miami, and then to the sweltering single-runway airport in Flores, Guatemala. The air that hit me as I stepped off the small propeller plane was a physical thing. A thick, wet blanket of heat and the smell of diesel fumes and damp earth. From there, it was a 4-hour Jeep ride. A bone-jarring, tooth-rattling ordeal over roads that were more suggestion than reality. The driver, a wiry man named Hector with a kind face and a gold tooth, navigated the ruts and potholes with practiced ease. At first, the landscape was cleared for farming, but slowly, inexorably, the jungle closed in. The trees became a solid, impenetrable wall of green on either side of the muddy track, a suffocating presence that seemed to swallow the light and sound. I watched on my own tablet's GPS as we drove, finding a small, grim satisfaction when Hector, grumbling about a washed-out bridge, declared a route impassable. I calmly pointed to a barely visible logging track on my satellite map. That one should connect back to the main road in about 5 kilometers, I said. He eyed me, then my tablet, with deep skepticism, but he turned the wheel. 20 minutes later, as we bumped back onto the main track, he shot me a surprised glance in the rearview mirror but said nothing. It was a tiny, unacknowledged victory, a prelude of what was to come. We arrived at the Allister base camp just as the sun was beginning to bleed through the canopy in hues of orange and purple. The sight of it sent a pang of disappointment through me. The grand expeditions of my childhood memories, with their neat rows of canvas tents and bustling crews, were gone. In their place was a sad, threadbare little settlement. A few tattered tents, one of which had a large patch on its roof, were clustered in a muddy clearing. A generator sputtered fitfully in the corner. The equipment looked old, worn, and poorly maintained. The entire place exuded an air of quiet desperation, the last gasp of a dying dream. A few local guides sat around a weak fire, their faces impassive. They looked up as I stepped out of the jeep, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and indifference. One of them, a younger man, caught my eye and offered a small, hesitant smile. It was the warmest welcome I'd received. A rustling in the undergrowth heralded the return of the explorers. My father and Duncan emerged from the jungle, their clothes caked in mud, their faces streaked with sweat and dirt. They were moving slowly, the exhaustion clear in every slumped shoulder and heavy footfall. They stopped dead when they saw me. For a moment, there was only the chirping of insects and the sputtering of the generator. My father's face, already grim, hardened into a mask of annoyance and suspicion. "Madeline," he said, his voice a low growl, "what in God's name are you doing here? Did your mother send you to cry and beg us to come home?" Before I could answer, Duncan stepped forward, a contemptuous sneer twisting his lips. He looked me up and down, taking in my clean travel clothes, my city pallor. "Well, well, look what the cat dragged in. Come for a little adventure tourism, Maddie. Finally get tired of your computer games and decide to see what a real explorer's life is like." The familiar sting of his words was dulled by my resolve. I had expected this. I was prepared for it. "Hello, Father. Duncan," I said, my voice even. "I'm not here for a holiday. I'm here to help." I held up the tablet. "My project. It's found something I think you need to see." Duncan let out a bark of laughter, a harsh, ugly sound in the quiet clearing. "Oh, this is priceless. She thinks her little game found Betrayal." He walked past me, slapping his gloves against his thigh, and headed for the main tent. My father didn't even glance at the tablet in my hand. He just waved a dismissive hand, his eyes weary and clouded with frustration. "We don't have time for digital ghosts, Madeline," he said, his voice heavy with the day's failure. "We need grit. We need stamina. We're close. I can feel it in my bones. Another few days, another push to the east." He trailed off, his gaze already drifting back toward the oppressive green wall of the jungle, his mind already on the next fruitless search. I was dismissed. It was that simple. I stood alone in the center of the camp, holding the key to everything, and they hadn't even bothered to look at the door. The next 24 hours were a master class in the Alistair family dynamic. I was a ghost at their feast of desperation. I was assigned a small, leaky tent at the edge of the camp, a clear physical manifestation of my place in their world. At mealtimes, I sat alone, listening to my father and brother discuss their flawed strategies in low, intense murmurs. They pored over the same cracked, sweat-stained maps that had failed them for years, their fingers tracing the same paths to nowhere. Duncan would try to rally the local guides with forced, hearty bravado, but I could see the skepticism in their eyes. They had heard these speeches before. They were professionals, here to do a job, but their employers were chasing a phantom, and their faith was wearing thin. The young guide who had smiled at me, whose name I learned was Luis, approached me while I was trying to get a satellite signal to check in with Aris. "That is a powerful computer, señorita," he said, nodding at my tablet. "Yes," I said, surprised. "It is." "My cousin, he studies computers in the city," Luis continued, his curiosity genuine. "He says they can see the world in new ways." "He's right," I said, a small flicker of hope igniting within me. "They can." He looked over his shoulder toward the main tent, where my father's frustrated voice could be heard. "They are good men," Luis said quietly, "but they look at the ground. They never look up." My mother, Eleanor, was a phantom of a different sort. She drifted through the camp, a wraith in linen, trying to impose a sliver of domestic order on the chaos. She ensured the water was boiled, The food was portioned, and the camp was kept as clean as mud would allow. She was the silent, unacknowledged quartermaster of this failing army. She found me sitting outside my tent, watching the fireflies begin their nightly dance. "I know this is hard for you, dear," she said, her hand resting briefly on my shoulder. Her touch was light, almost apologetic. "I was surprised to see you, your father. He is so driven. He has pinned everything we have left on this." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm here. I can help him." I turned the tablet on, the screen illuminating her tired face. "Mom, just look at this. This is a new type of map. It shows..." For a single, beautiful moment, she leaned in, her eyes wide with genuine interest. The glowing image of the sunken caldera, rendered in false color topography, held her attention. A line of worry on her forehead smoothed out, replaced by wonder. "My goodness, Madeline, it looks like..." "Eleanor," my father's voice, sharp and demanding, cut through the night from the main tent. "Where is the quinine? Mateo's fever is up again." My mother flinched as if struck. The wonder vanished from her face, replaced by the familiar, strained obedience. "Coming, Alistair," she called back. She gave me a quick, fleeting look of apology. "Another time, dear," she whispered. And then she was gone, scurrying back to her duties, the moment of connection shattered. I was left in the dark, the glow of my discovery feeling colder and more isolating than ever. The breaking point arrived that night. My father had called a strategy meeting in the main tent. It was less a meeting and more of an inquisition. The lead guide, a stoic, weathered man named Mateo, stood before my father, his arms crossed. "Senior Alistair," Mateo said, his Spanish-accented English heavy with finality. "We cannot continue to the east. The ground is unstable. It is a swamp. My men will not risk it further. There is nothing there." "There is everything there," my father roared, slamming his fist on the map table, making the oil lamp jump. "My calculations are precise. You're losing your nerve, man." Duncan stepped up, looming over the smaller guide. "My father is the most experienced explorer alive," he snarled. "If he says we go east, we go east. Or is the pay not good enough for you anymore?" It was a cheap, ugly insult, and I saw Mateo's jaw tighten. This was it. The entire expedition was about to collapse, not with a bang, but with the quiet refusal of the men who did the actual work. Desperation was a foul taste in the humid air. They were losing their crew, their funding was gone. This was their last chance, and they were about to burn it to the ground with their own arrogant pride. I saw the entire Alistair legacy, from my great-grandfather's triumphs to my grandfather's wisdom, turning to ash in this squalid, lamplit tent. And I knew I could not let that happen. I stood up. My chair scraped against the dirt floor, a jarring sound that cut through the tension. Every head in the tent turned towards me. For a moment, my throat closed up. I could feel the weight of their collective disdain. I was the child, the outsider, the girl with the game. But then I saw the image from my tablet in my mind's eye, the ghostly, beautiful city, and the words came. "You're looking in the wrong place," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried in the sudden silence. It shook slightly, but it was firm. "All of you." My father stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. "Madeline, this does not concern you. Sit down." "No," I said, taking a step forward. I connected my tablet to the portable battery-powered projector I had brought. With a tap of my finger, a new map filled the canvas wall of the tent. It wasn't a flat, ink-lined chart. It was a three-dimensional, rotating LiDAR scan, a glowing, ghostly image of the jungle floor stripped of its vegetation. And nestled within it was the clear, undeniable outline of buried structures. The entire camp went silent. The guides, Luis and the others, let out soft gasps. My father and brother just stared, their mouths slightly agape. "You've been searching for Iximchial based on a flawed 19th century translation of the Khan Codex," I said, my confidence growing with every word. "Grandfather's journal suggested as much. He knew the translation was too literal. My system analyzed the original glyphs, cross-referencing them with 2 decades of geological surveys and satellite data. The city isn't on a plateau, which is geologically unstable. It's in a karst basin, a natural depression, hidden by a triple-layer canopy. It's 30 kilometers northwest of here. I pointed the laser dot from my tablet onto the largest structure. Right there. The silence in the tent stretched for a long, taut moment, broken only by the hum of the projector and the distant cry of a howler monkey. Then, the spell was shattered by Duncan's raw, incredulous voice. "This is a joke." He took a step towards the projection, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. "This has to be a joke. You cooked this up on your computer. It's a fake. You generated this from your stupid game to humiliate us." His accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. He wanted it to be a lie, needed it to be, because the alternative was that his entire life, his entire identity as the rugged heir, was built on a foundation of foolishness. My father's reaction was even more terrifying. His face went white with a rage so profound it seemed to suck the warmth from the air. He didn't see a discovery on the wall. He saw a verdict. He saw an indictment of his life's work, delivered by the one person he had never taken seriously. "You stand there," he began, his voice a low, shaking tremor of pure fury, "in your clean clothes, with your magic lantern show, and you presume to tell me? After 40 years in this jungle, 40 years of sweat and blood and sacrifice, you presume to tell me where to look?" He took a step toward me, his eyes blazing. "You, who have never felt the sting of 1,000 cuts from the bush, who has never known the fear of being truly lost. You are no Alistair." His words were a physical blow. They struck the scared little girl inside me, the one who had presented her hand-drawn map all those years ago and been met with dismissal. For a heart-stopping second, I felt myself shrink. But then, looking at the glowing, undeniable truth I had projected onto the tent wall, something else rose up to meet the pain. A cold, hard certainty. I had the truth. They had only pride. "No," I said, my voice cutting through his rage, clear and steady. "You're right. I'm not." I met his furious gaze without flinching. "I'm not an Alistair who walks in circles for decades, bankrupting his family and destroying his own health out of sheer, pig-headed stubbornness. I'm the Alistair who uses the tools of the century. I'm the one who actually listened to grandfather's theories, instead of just turning them into campfire legends." I aimed the laser pointer at a specific swirling pattern on the 3D map, a place where the ground-penetrating radar showed a dense, regular structure. "This anomaly," I said, my voice ringing with an authority I didn't know I possessed, "matches the public data from the GeoSat-4 satellite. Any one of you could have looked it up. And this circular vegetation pattern above it is consistent with soil high in limestone phosphate, from the decay of ancient plasterwork. It's not a ghost, Father. It's not a magic lantern show. It is data. And that data is more real and more reliable than the feeling in your bones that has led you to nothing but ruin." A stunned silence fell again. Duncan looked as if I had slapped him. My father seemed for the first time to be at a complete loss for words. It was Matteo, the lead guide, who broke the stalemate. He had been watching the exchange silently, his weathered face unreadable. Now he stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the projection. He ignored my father and brother completely and spoke directly to me. "The sinkhole basin," he said, his voice thoughtful. "The locals call it El Ojo Hundido, the sunken eye." My head snapped up. It was the exact phrase from my grandfather's journal. "They say it is a place of bad spirits," Matteo continued, his gaze still on the map. "No one goes there. It is bad luck. But—" He paused, looking at the topographical data, at the clear indication of a basin. "The geology is right. A city that large would need a constant source of fresh water. A cenote, a large one at the center of a basin. It is possible. It is logical. He finally turned from the projection to look at my father. The deference was gone from his eyes, replaced by a cool, professional assessment. "Senor Alistair," he said formally, "for 1 month my men and I have followed you and found nothing but snakes and disappointment. Her map." He nodded his head toward me, a gesture of newfound respect. "It is the only new idea we have seen. It is worth 1 day." My father was cornered. I could see the war in his eyes. His pride, his entire identity, was screaming at him to reject it, to throw me out of the camp. But he was also a pragmatist at his core. He looked at the faces of Mateo and the other guides. He saw their weary frustration had been replaced by a spark of genuine curiosity, of hope. He saw his authority, so absolute just moments ago, hanging by a thread. He knew that if he said no, he would lose them for good. He would be left alone in the jungle with his pride and his empty pockets. Duncan was still sputtering. "It's a trick, a digital manipulation. You can't trust a computer." But his protest sounded weak now, petulant. I saw my opening and I pressed my advantage, my voice calm and unwavering. "1 day," I said, turning to my father. "That's all I'm asking for. Give me Mateo, Luis, and 1 other man. We'll take a survey drone. The coordinates are precise. We can be there and back by nightfall. If we find nothing, I will pack my bag, fly home, and you will never have to hear about my silly game ever again. I'll disappear." I paused, letting the weight of my offer settle in the tent. "But if we find it, if I'm right, the official announcement will not be about the Alistair expedition. It will be about the discovery made possible by Alistair Geomatics, the mapping technology that I developed. My company, my name. It was a wager for the entire Alistair legacy, his way or mine." He stared at me, his jaw working silently. The fight had gone out of his eyes, replaced by a weary, hollowed-out look of defeat. He was trapped by my logic, by his crew's hope, by his own failures. He finally drew a ragged breath and spat out the single word that would change everything. "Fine." Dawn broke over the jungle canopy, a riot of soft pinks and golds that did little to pierce the gloom on the forest floor. The air was cool and thick with mist. Our small party assembled in the pre-dawn quiet. There was me, Mateo, Luis, and another quiet, capable guide named Carlos. And to my deep annoyance, there was Duncan. He had insisted on coming, his face set in a sullen mask. "I'm coming to expose this fraud," he'd muttered to our father, loud enough for me to hear. "I'm not letting her make a fool of this family," our father had simply nodded. Too defeated to argue, the trek was more grueling than anything I could have imagined. This wasn't a tidy English footpath. This was the jungle, raw and unforgiving. We hacked through thick vines, scrambled over moss-slicked roots the size of pythons, and waded through streams of muddy, knee-high water. The humidity was oppressive, my lungs burned, and within an hour my practical travel clothes were soaked with sweat. But I didn't complain. I bit my lip against the pain in my muscles and the sting of a dozen small cuts, and I kept moving. I was powered by a fierce, unyielding determination. Mateo was a silent, efficient teacher, occasionally pointing out a venomous snake camouflaged in the leaf litter, or showing me how to use a liana for a handhold on a steep incline. His instructions were practical, without condescension. He was treating me like a member of the team. Duncan, on the other hand, was a constant negative presence. He trailed behind me, offering a running commentary of sarcastic remarks. "Tired already, Maddie? The jungle's a bit tougher than your air-conditioned office, isn't it? Watch out for that root. Oh, too late. Need a hand up?" I ignored him, focusing on placing my feet, on breathing, on the rhythmic swing of Mateo's machete ahead of me. His scorn was just noise. The data was the signal. After nearly 5 hours of relentless trekking, Mateo stopped and checked his GPS. He looked at the coordinates, then at my tablet and nodded. "We are here, the edge of the basin. We had reached the location my algorithm had pinpointed. But before us stood an unbroken, seemingly impenetrable wall of green. A dense, tangled barricade of vegetation, thicker and more intimidating than anything we had passed through. It was easy to see why no one had ever ventured further. It looked like the end of the world. Duncan let out a triumphant, sneering laugh. Well, there you have it, the end of the line, a big wall of nothing. Now what, genius? Is your little program going to magically open a door for us? I didn't answer him. I calmly slipped the heavy pack off my aching shoulders and unzipped the main compartment. From it, I carefully removed a sleek carbon fiber drone. It was a high-end, long-range mapping drone, a piece of equipment worth more than my car. As I unfolded its arms and attached the propellers, Duncan fell silent, watching me with a confused frown. I powered it on. Its quiet electric hum a stark contrast to the cacophony of the jungle. I synced it to my tablet, the drone's camera feed appearing on my screen. With a gentle push of the controls, the drone lifted off the ground, hovered for a moment, and then shot straight up, rising above us, disappearing into the vast green canopy. On the tablet, the view transformed. We were seeing what no human had seen before. The drone cleared the treetops, and the world opened up. The camera feed showed a breathtaking, impossible sight. It wasn't a sinkhole, not a simple one. It was a massive, perfectly circular caldera, at least 5 kilometers in diameter, a sunken world hidden within the jungle. And in the center of that caldera, almost completely consumed by a millennium of growth, were the structures, the unmistakable right-angled geometry of man-made buildings. We could see the flat, tiered top of a massive pyramid breaking through the canopy like a stone iceberg. We could see the faint outline of a vast rectangular plaza and the parallel mounds of what had to be a ball court. As I piloted the drone lower, more details resolved out of the green haze. The carved stone faces on a crumbling wall, the wide stone staircases disappearing into the undergrowth, the dark, gaping mouths of collapsed temples. It was a city, a whole, magnificent, lost city. It was Iximchal. It was real. A collective gasp went through our small group. Mateo and the other guides were murmuring in Spanish, their voices filled with a mixture of awe and superstitious fear. Dios mío, el ojo hundido, Luis whispered, making the sign of the cross. Duncan was completely, utterly silent. He stared at the screen of my tablet, his face pale beneath the grime and sweat. The sneer was gone, the arrogance stripped away. His expression was a raw, complex mask of shock, disbelief, and something I had never seen on his face before, profound, soul-deep shame. All his life, he had been the hero of a story that turned out to be a lie. The real treasure map wasn't made of paper and ink, but of light and code. I just kept watching the screen, piloting the drone in a slow, graceful arc over the heart of the city, my own tears welling up and blurring the image. I wasn't crying from vindication, or not just from that. I was crying from the sheer, overwhelming beauty of it. It was real, my code, my work, my grandfather's theory, my game. It was all real. The journey back to camp was made in a strange, transformative silence. The weight of the discovery seemed to press down on us, rendering small talk impossible. Duncan walked with his head down, not saying a word. He didn't offer a single sarcastic comment. He just trudged on, lost in his own shattered world. When we finally broke through the trees into the muddy clearing of the base camp, the sun was low in the sky. My father was there, pacing back and forth in front of the main tent like a caged lion. He stopped when he saw us, his face a mess of anxiety and dread. He looked from my face to Duncan's, searching for an answer. I didn't give him one, not with words. I walked past him, into the tent, my tired legs moving with a new purpose. He followed me in, his shadow falling across the table. I said nothing. I just placed the tablet on the worn map of his failed expeditions. I tapped the screen and I played the video. I played the drone footage of the lost city of Betrayal. My father stared at the screen. He watched the pyramid rise from the jungle. He watched the drone sweep over the ghostly outlines of the plazas and temples. His hands, which had been clenched into fists, slowly uncurled. His face, so long hardened by pride and frustration, began to crumble. All the anger, all the bitterness, all the years of defiant pride seemed to drain out of him, leaving him hollowed out, vulnerable. He looked from the impossible city on the screen to me, his daughter, the architect of this revelation. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't say, "You were right." He didn't even say, "Thank you." He said something far more profound, something that bridged the chasm that had separated us for my entire life. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a cracked whisper, thick with an emotion I couldn't name. It was awe. It was regret. It was understanding. "My father," he said, his eyes locking with mine. "Thomas, he always said they built it in the eye of the world." In that moment, surrounded by the ghosts of his failures, he finally, truly saw me. The world learned of the discovery of Betrayal not through a triumphant press release from the Alistair expedition, but through a joint announcement with Alistair Geomatics. My father, to his credit, honored our wager to the letter. He stood before the television cameras at a press conference in Guatemala City, looking older and more tired, but also lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted. He spoke of the decades of searching, but he didn't frame them as failures. He called them the necessary groundwork. And then he turned the podium over to me. I was terrified, but as I looked out at the sea of reporters and flashing cameras, I saw my father give me a small, proud nod. I explained the technology, the synthesis of data, the algorithm that could see through the canopy. I spoke of my grandfather's theories. The story was a sensation. The media loved the narrative, the fusion of old-school grit and new-age genius, the daughter who succeeded where the father had struggled, saving the family name not by following in his footsteps, but by forging her own path. My company, Alistair Geomatics, was suddenly on the map in a very literal way. Our valuation skyrocketed. Contracts and partnership offers poured in from governments, universities, and research institutions around the world. The Alistair name was saved from the ignominy of bankruptcy and ridicule. It was redefined for a new century. The dynamics within my family shifted, slowly and seismically. My father underwent the most startling transformation. He hung up his machete for good. His obsession with the jungle was replaced by a new one: his daughter's brilliance. He became my most ardent champion, traveling to universities and conferences, not to boast of his own past adventures, but to speak about the future of exploration. His lectures always ended with the same slide: a photo of me standing in front of my bank of monitors, and beside it, the first clear ground-level image of the main pyramid of Betrayal. Tradition gave us the question, he would say, his voice thick with pride. But technology, my daughter's technology, gave us the answer. Duncan's journey was quieter and far more difficult. The discovery had shattered his identity. He was no longer the heir apparent, the rugged hero in waiting. He was lost for a time, adrift. He spent 6 months traveling on his own, not exploring, but just being. He returned a different man, quieter, more thoughtful. He came to my office one afternoon, hat in hand. It was the most awkward conversation of our lives. He didn't apologize in a grand, sweeping gesture. His apology was in his request. "Maddie," he said, unable to meet my eyes, "I don't know anything about computers, but I know the jungle. I know logistics, supply lines, how to manage a field crew. If you have a place for me, I'd like to work for you." I gave him a job. He became the head of our field operations team, the crucial link between my digital world and the physical reality on the ground. Our relationship didn't magically heal overnight, but it began to rebuild slowly and awkwardly on a new foundation of quiet, earned, mutual respect. My mother, Eleanor, simply bloomed. With the crushing weight of the quest lifted, she seemed to grow younger. The perpetual anxiety left her eyes. She and I became closer than we had ever been, sharing long phone calls that weren't shadowed by financial worry or family tension. She was finally at peace, her family not just solvent, but whole. A year after the discovery, the first major exhibition of artifacts from Ixmiquil opened at the British Museum. The four of us attended the gala opening together. My father, in a fine tuxedo, beamed as he introduced me to the world's most renowned archaeologists. "This is my daughter, Madeline," he would say. "She's the one who showed us all how to see." Across the crowded room, I saw Duncan, competently and quietly coordinating with the museum staff about the transport of a new artifact. He caught my eye and gave me a small, respectful nod. It was more than enough. As for me, I learned the most surprising lesson of all. The external validation I had craved for so long, the moment of "I told you so," felt strangely hollow once I had it. The victory was sweet, but the true prize wasn't their approval. It was my own. I had built something real and important, not in spite of them, but because of the unique path they had forced me to take. I continued to run my company, leading expeditions from my command center in London. But now, a few times a year, I went into the field myself. I found I had a taste for it after all, a love for the smell of damp earth and the feel of solid ground under my boots. I found a balance between the two worlds, my grandfather's and my own. One evening, while going through his old journals again, I found a final cryptic note I'd never seen before, tucked into the back cover. It read, "The map is not the territory. The value is not in the destination, but in the finding. The truth is always between the lines." I finally understood. My family had been so obsessed with the destination, the physical city, that they had forgotten how to truly find it. They were looking at the lines on the map. The secret, all along, had been in the space between them. In the end, the greatest discovery I made wasn't a lost city of stone and secrets buried deep in the jungle. It was the realization that my own worth was never buried out there with it, waiting for my family to unearth it and tell me it was valuable. It was inside me all along, built from lines of code, from late nights and quiet determination, from believing in a new way of seeing the world when no one else did. The world is full of people who will tell you that your map is wrong, that your path is foolish, that your passion is just a game. So I want to hand it over to you. Have you ever been underestimated or had your dreams dismissed by the people who were supposed to support you most? Share your story in the comments below, because these stories need to be heard. Don't forget to like this video if my journey resonated with you, and please subscribe for more stories about finding your own way. Remember, sometimes the people who believe in you the least end up giving you the most powerful motivation of all. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey today. I wish you all the strength to follow your own map, no matter where it leads.